testing. Testing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are live.
Great, thank you, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Special Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of February 3rd, 2022. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting today on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and this will be the first of 3 workshops on the MOCP that we've been looking forward to. So with that, I'll turn to the first item on our agenda. Please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first item is approval of the agenda.
Okay, moved, seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And the next item, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is public input period, and there are no applications.
Okay, thank you. So we will move to the next item then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is reports. R1 is a report from the Planning Strategic Initiative Division regarding bylaw number 4373, official community plan for the electoral areas workshop, Schedule G, growth containment boundaries, and Schedule L, land use designations. And there is a presentation by Modus and Liquor Spatial.
Okay, thank you very much. So welcome to Modus. And Patrick, I don't know if Coralie, did you want to introduce or?
Sure. Good afternoon, directors, and through the chair, I'm very pleased to represent to you today Patrick Ostrich from Modus and Aaron, I believe there he is, Aaron Liquor from Liquor Spatial, who've been working with us actually over the last few years on the development of the framework for the new land use designations in the modernized official community plan and the growth containment boundaries. And for the purpose of the public who may be watching, we have met individually with each director to review these draft 2 segments of the forthcoming bylaws. And we want to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to see them holistically and collectively today. There's also Brian Dennison online to answer any questions with respect to water and servicing. And we also have Andrea and Rob on from GIS today as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you, Coralie, and thank you to the directors of the electoral areas for having us here this day. I will start off by saying that earlier on, just a few hours ago, my work laptop was on the fritz, and so I've managed to pull up with my personal laptop. I don't have the same kind of software as I would typically have, so I apologize in advance if the presentation isn't as smooth as you've come to maybe expect from me, but we'll hopefully be able to get through all my slides and have a really productive discussion here today on the growth containment boundaries and the land use maps that we're proposing. I also just want to note that, you know, it was really such a pleasure to meet with each one of you individually to have a good localized discussion about the land use designations and the growth containment boundaries. So we've done our best to now reflect that work into this next version, but we're also acknowledging and aware that there are some changes that will still need to happen over the course of the next few months and before essentially that we head out into these community circles and to make sure that they really are reflective and refined of all the comments that we've heard as of late. This is, we're covering a very large geographic area here, so it does take a bit of time to refine these things and to make sure that they're, you know, that each property is either perfectly designated or in or out of the GCB. So it is quite a bit of work, and there's still a little bit of work to do as we move forward. Thankfully, we have the 2 workshops on March 3rd and March 10th, when hopefully we can have something that's a bit more finalized before we head over into the public engagement process of this project. So I just wanted to note that before we get started here with my slides, which I'm going to share right away. I'm hoping everybody can see this.
Yeah, we can see that, I think.
Does that work in full screen here?
Yes.
Second. There we go.
That's better. Great. Thank you.
All right, so we really only have 2 big topics to cover this afternoon. There's the growth containment boundaries and the land use designations and maps. So I'll start off by showing the proposed draft containment boundaries, and then we'll move on to the land use designations and the maps. In terms of today, really we want to give you an overview of the changes since the last time we presented these to you in October, I believe it was. It's been a little while since then, and we want to show the changes that have occurred. We also want to gain a little bit of feedback from the directors, and so there'll be a few stops in the presentation as an opportunity to have a discussion. And if there is a particular item that a director would like to speak to when there's a map on the screen, then I'm happy to also discuss it at that point. But we just so you know, we do have some question periods planned throughout this presentation. So really important to note that when we started this process of modernizing the official community plan, we understood that there were some very complex land use challenges that we were hoping to solve through this. Notably, over 100 and some land use designations, many of which didn't include certain types of density thresholds and didn't give a whole lot of good direction around how what can be built on a piece of land and how that might be able to gain support from staff and from the directors. And so really what we want to ensure throughout this process as we develop the modernized official community plan is that we're communicating a very compelling story as to why we're updating it, why we're modernizing it, and why it's important to do all of this consolidation so that we have one official community plan that covers this grand geographic area. We also want to make sure that we're simplifying things. We're making it easier to understand, the regulations within the OCP, the policies within the OCP, so that not only do residents have a better opportunity, a better chance at understanding what's within this plan, but also to help developers and staff as well, and yourselves as directors, to have a really clear understanding of what's expected of developers and what's expected in any kind of changes as it relates to development of land and land uses. So while we appreciate the complexity, we really want to make sure that this modernized official community plan is something that's simple, that's concise, that's clear, and is accessible to all the users who will be using this particular document. And so starting off with the growth containment boundaries, we want to also emphasize once again that, since 2011 through to 2016, nearly 67% of the population growth and 78% of dwelling growth in the CBRD has occurred outside of the growth containment boundaries. And so when analyzing dwellings that were constructed since 2017, a similar sort of pattern, nearly 58% of units were built outside the GCBs as well. So that gives us a bit of a sense of how strongly that growth containment boundary has been followed in the past, and really gives us a chance, hopefully through this modernized official community plan, to formalize where we want growth to happen, and to really kind of create a bit of a harder line, ensure that the densities that are within the growth containment boundary allow us to focus growth in those areas, and that the densities in our land use designations outside of the growth containment boundary try and prevent and discourage growth from happening so that we can really make sure that we're managing growth in a responsible manner. A great example of this, and I don't mean to pick on Electoral Area C here, but this is a really great example where the current growth containment boundary around Cobble Hill, includes the Cobble Hill Village, but then when you look outside of that growth containment boundary, you see quite a bit of subdivision that has occurred. You see quite a bit of development, whether it's the Arbutus Ridge development or others, that has happened. And so really what we're trying to do through these proposed draft growth containment boundaries is try and formalize some of the stuff that has happened already, but also ensure that, we're not allowing this level of subdivision from happening outside of the growth containment boundaries as well. So really the big principles that have informed this work around the growth containment boundaries is that we want to first of all link servicing with growth. So where investments in water and sewer infrastructure can be supported by future growth, we'd like to include those areas within the growth containment boundary. We also want to focus growth in strategic locations. So these are places near village centers where there's jobs, public transit, and perhaps other amenities so that we create these types of very complete communities that enhance residents' qualities of life. We also want to ensure, and I noted this a little bit earlier, that densities that are allowed outside of the growth containment boundaries are reflected of those rural land use patterns. That means below 1 unit per hectare, which would prevent quite a bit of subdivision in most places. That's really what we want to focus on, is not allowing, too much of this type of rural sprawl to happen outside of that growth containment boundary. And then finally, ensuring that the densities that are within the growth containment boundaries allow for a little bit more growth that are reflective of those suburban and more urban land use patterns. So really looking at units, densities above that 1 unit per hectare threshold. So how we got there for both the GCBs and the land use process, we had held some staff workshops throughout this journey across all 9 electoral areas to better understand things like the water supply, the servicing challenges in certain developments, the land use details, some of the applications that have come through recently, and more. And then, of course, we had a workshop with the electoral area directors in October to provide a bit of an overview. And then we had individual meetings with all of you to refine some of these boundaries and to better understand some of the local considerations. So it's been a good amount of work. And even before we had these staff workshops, there was all the work with the land use designations and trying to consolidate over 100 land use designations into what we now have as about 21. In terms of the growth objectives, what we're really trying to achieve here is we're not wanting to explore further expansion of the growth containment boundary, except where there may be some special study areas that indicate the potential for future comprehensive development, or if there is a real need to supply infrastructure servicing to certain developments. So there is a little bit of flexibility in that statement, but we want to make sure that we're doing it in a very responsible way. So the draft growth containment boundaries that we present eventually and are as a part of that adopted bylaw in the future, we would hope wouldn't be expanded until the plan is revised at a much later date. Growth is focused within the growth containment boundary. We spoke to this a little bit earlier as well. And growth is focused within existing centers and residential neighborhoods, with some greenfield sites that are available for future development, and some of those are noted in the land use designations. We also want to avoid growth in floodplain or hazard areas. So really trying to avoid bringing the growth containment boundary into those areas, but also really using the land use designations as a way to prevent further subdivision or further growth in areas that just aren't suitable for it. So let's start off with the electoral areas A, B, and C. So what you see on this map here in yellow is the original current growth containment boundary. And in red is the proposed expansion of that, essentially creating what would be a sort of contiguous growth containment boundary across all three electoral areas from Mill Bay to Shawnigan Lake and up to Cobble Hill. Some of the sort of changes that we have completed since the meetings that we've had with you individually. So one is a bit of an extension of the growth containment boundary just south of Shawnigan Lake Village out to the Easter Seals area, and to also incorporate St. John's School. There's an understanding that there's probably some interest in that area to do some form of development and enhance some of those properties. And so really wanting to make sure that should that happen, that there is perhaps an opportunity to leverage that development for additional servicing and infrastructure in the area. And that's probably quite important, especially adjacent to Shawnigan Lake, where we may have some issues around septic tanks polluting the water. And so as much as we can do to try and get people on infrastructure services here on a community service is certainly positive. We've also excluded a few parts just north of the Shawnigan Lake area. So this used to be, at the last meeting that I presented, this area here that I'm showing with my mouse used to be included. We've decided to scale that back a little bit. We've included a big parcel here just north of the village as well within the GCB, identified as a parcel of land that isn't in the agricultural land reserve, but has potential for some good amount of development within proximity of the village, within proximity of really great amenities and services. So seeing that as a strong potential for future development. So those are the big changes, I think, from these three electoral areas. I'll just move now into electoral areas.
Well, since you're in that area, can we ask a couple of questions?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. Mr. Chair, is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead, Director Atkins. Thank you.
Yeah, so that area that you pointed out at St. John's there, so if that is being suggested, I would question why to the east of that whole area underneath, that's underneath so you can see how it's all really small lots. Like, I would think it would be wise to include that in it, so that for any servicing, to encourage servicing, and so that people would maybe have lane houses one day, and then they would tie up to the service. And so it doesn't make sense just to have that growth along the lake when it's actually puts pressure on the lake without including these other areas, so that we bring water down, we bring sewer down. Is that?
Yeah, we can certainly look into that. There's definitely some potential in here. It's mostly kind of large lot, rural type of properties down here. So there's definitely some potential for some.
It looks quite density. Developed.
Yeah.
It looks quite developed compared to the.
Yeah, but they're still quite large lots. I mean, especially in comparison to the lots that are located adjacent to Shawnigan Lake or kind of in the village here. They're rather large. So there is potential for subdivision within that area. We could certainly look at it.
Yeah, because I think they have subdivision now to half or something. I don't know. I think it's worthwhile looking at that area.
Excuse me, Director Atkins. That's Strath. Sorry, excuse me. I jump in. That's Strathcona Heights, that road there.
Because they're subdividing now. We've had applications coming through there. So if they're subdividing, they should be tying up to, like, their land designation could maybe be a little bit different than right in the core. But my greatest concern is that we need to encourage any growth to have sewer. So without it, it just doesn't happen. So
with the land use designate, I think it'd be important to look at the zoning, the current zoning, and see how much subdivision potential exists under the current zoning, because those are the current entitlements. So, and then you're right, if there is potential there for quite a bit of zoning or quite a bit of subdivision, then let's try and include it in the growth containment boundary and encourage the tying up into the community services at that point. I wonder if maybe Brian would be able to speak a little bit to what type of servicing might exist near here. That be possible, Brian?
Mr. Chairman, through you.
Mr. Dennison, yes, please.
Thank you. Right now, there's nothing that's all on site. So that's on-site septic, on-site wells. It's not, you know, so we don't have sewer service in Shawnigan Village area now, of course. I am trying to see if I can wrangle that together by hook or by crook. And there's some various partners that may be part of that. You know, anything with servicing is possible if the money's there to drive it. So long as it works for the planning, it could be done. And it is uphill, so that's helpful on the sewer side to drain downwards. On the other hand, for water, you might have to have you know, boost it up, but that's usually pretty easy to do. So like, it could be doable if that's, you know, the way I view this, if I may put it this way, is that, you know, planning can lead as far as the vision, and then we'll try and solve the servicing problem. So, you know, and it wouldn't be, I mean, if you pick something 20 kilometers away, I might say, sorry, that's going to be really hard. But so long as it's within reasonable proximity of the village core area, and you know, what I'd like to see is, you know, if the St. John's project goes ahead and things like that, I'd like to see a main running along Shawnigan Lake Road into the village. And so the potential there to hook up, it would be quite feasible actually, and it's downhill, so you can manage that quite well. So it kind of depends on how that plays out. At some point though, if we had a main down there, then that could be pretty easily accommodated.
Right. Thank you.
Excuse me, Blaise, but I think Aaron put something in the chat to indicate that the average lot size was 3 hectares on that area. Thank you.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
so
if I may, yeah, the all lots in that area are averaging 3 hectares in size. The current zoning is RR2, so allows a minimum lot size of 2 hectares. For current zoning, there's kind of reduced development potential in that area.
Good to know. Thank you, Aaron. Okay, any other questions on A, B, and C? Don't see any, Patrick, so carry on, please.
Question here.
I have a question.
Oh, I didn't see. I can't really see with the screen. Sorry.
So just speaking to that issue, I am wondering what the trade-offs are from expanding your growth containment boundary to take advantage of potential servicing versus trying to have a more focused growth containment boundary at this time for sort of the next 10 or 20 years to kind of focus growth in a more concentrated way to get the servicing started. So which is the best way of going about it?
Who would like to take that?
I see Brian with his hand up.
Okay, Mr. Dennison.
You're muted, Brian.
Sorry, I mute all the time. So this is a question we've been bouncing around a little bit in the last little while in the MOCP process. And I would say in the circumstance of a rural regional district like we have, where we don't have the resources, it's a tricky matter to bring the resources forward to create services when they're not there already. And so the way I kind of put it is that in the early stage, planning can help engineering establish those services. So if there's particular projects or the potential for particular projects that would enable us to create that, you know, that sort of framework of, say, a water service or sewer service, depending where you're talking, then that would be very helpful. It makes it possible instead of virtually impossible. Because we don't have any money. Like, that's always the problem. We don't come with any money. We can't concentrate money from anywhere. It would be a really long shot to get a grant when there's no servicing now to produce it. They just won't fund that. We've tried that in the past and it's really difficult to do. So if you have an area where you think, yes, this is an area where we'd really, it's a really good idea to have sewer service, it would enable many things, then maybe zoning, planning can help the engineering side to enable a few of these sort of projects so we can get that initial service started. Once it's started, then I view it the other way, that engineering can help planning, because then they can just plan somewhat more freely, and we can provide that servicing because it's there, it's established. So, our two in the south end, two good examples of that are Cobble Hill and Mill Bay, where we took some various developments were approved. They had their on-site services established. And then we got a bit of infrastructure money, grant money in each case to integrate those sewer services and provide capacity for the future. So now, and both of those are exactly, the case what we've done. And so now both of those areas have sewer services with substantial surplus capacity, a means to receive funds as new people connect, so they pay a capacity fee, and then we can take that capacity fee and invest in further upgrades once we've run out of capacity of the current phase. And so we're ready to go there. Now, you don't have to really think about what does engineering need for servicing. It's the other way around. What can we do for you, depending on what the planning comes out with? So, say they want to be a higher density, I don't know, affordable housing project in Mill Bay that's going to be 100 units. Well, we've got the capacity. It's right there, and so that could be done if that's a thing that the planning process identifies as being good for the community. So that's kind of my answer to that. It's a bit tricky. It's kind of starts one way and then it switches to the other way once we have that initial service.
And I might add to that from a planning perspective, there is a bit of a tug of war in a way where depending on the values that we want to plan for, if we really do want to focus growth within, smaller, compact villages and closer to services and closer to jobs and commercial amenities, you may want to, very much tailor that growth containment boundary a little bit tighter and closer to some of those services so that you're essentially encouraging future growth, you're encouraging the redevelopment in those areas. But that doesn't mean that we can't look at opportunities elsewhere and a little bit outside of that area. It just means that it might take a little bit longer. The growth might be a little bit, might happen a little bit in other places before it really reaches a sort of good cluster within those village areas where we might want a little bit more growth than other places. So it is a question of priorities to a certain extent, and the larger that the growth containment boundary gets, it certainly pushes away that strategic thinking around planning for those compact villages. Say that.
Okay, thank you. Before I go to follow-up, Director Nicholson, just ask everyone, let's use the chat. If you do have a question, let me know, and then we can leave the screen up while we're talking. Follow-up, Director Nicholson?
Yeah, I appreciate Patrick's last comments. I think it really speaks to the time frame that we're doing this, expect this plan to live. And we haven't had a discussion about that, but I mean, my expectation, given how slowly things actually happen, is that this is going to be, pretty good. This should be pretty good for about 20 years. And so I guess the question is, if you want to expand the growth containment boundary anymore, would you expect that to happen in the next 20 years? And I think that one would want to understand what the impacts of a more focused development would be on the surrounding areas before one sort of started to expand that thinking. Anyway, I'll stop.
Okay, thank you. So I have Director Morrison and then Director Wilson. Director Morrison.
Could I be in there as well? Thank you.
Okay, Director Kuhn.
Thank you. So I think I need a little bit of clarification, and I sort of want to tie into what Director Acton, I think, was leading to, in that if it's a declaration of containment area, that might drive services to follow. And I appreciate Mr. Dennison's explanation, but this is the approach that I'm looking at. In my area, we're going to use the containment boundaries to limit growth and have any enhancements within that area, and to more or less stop growth outside of that and protect the lakeshore. Here you have a fully developed over, decades and decades and decades waterfront that has leaky old septic systems in some cases. If there were to be growth, and I'm looking at this as an aspirational document, that we want the areas surrounding the lake for environmental purposes to all be on sewer and perhaps to be on a water system. So can you explain why you wouldn't include that area? And the other part to this is you've explained that you want to limit growth for those potential, for the potential of subdivision. But what about the potential of adding a carriage house on an existing lot? They want to add that additional dwelling unit, but they shouldn't because they're waterfront and, the potential for environmental degradation. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll start off with the first question in relation to the sewer system potentially going all the way around the lake. Is definitely something that we're looking at. In the land use designation map, what you'll see is we've included an overlay that goes over all the residential properties that go all the way around the lake outside of the proposed growth containment boundary. And that overlay is specifically to hint or to signal at the need to do, it's a special study area for infrastructure and servicing essentially. And it's saying, we don't want to signal more growth in this area because that could exacerbate some of the existing issues with the septic tanks. Perhaps leaking into Shawnigan Lake. But what we would like to explore in this area is servicing and the ability to bring a sewer line all the way around the lake. And so the land use designation signals that. It says there's an overlay. It says this is a special study area. We want to explore how we might get a sewer line all the way around the lake, because that is going to be a very expensive project. And it may require grants. It may require, it may also be something of an incentive to homeowners to upgrade their septic tanks to something that is more modern, that is safer. So there's a slew of other ways to hopefully impact the health of Shawnigan Lake, and I think this is. We're trying to achieve it without indicating that we want future growth to happen all the way around the lake, essentially.
Well,
the other question was subdivision versus density, and you've kind of alluded to that. There may be density increase without subdivision actually happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's very possible, especially within the growth containment boundaries. We would want to explore that probably a little bit further in the zoning bylaw work, where we allow, carriage homes or secondary suites within certain types of zones, and making sure that those are zones that are being used, whether they're within the growth containment boundary or outside. Perhaps there's a condition whether or not there's the allowance for secondary suites. But that's something that I think we would explore further through the zoning bylaw work.
Okay, thank you. So I have Director Wilson and then Kuhn.
Yeah, thank you, Blaise. One of the things that concerns me the most is the use of plain language. And I'm glad that there has been a lot of thought put into this, and especially with the growth containment boundaries. These look great. But one of the things that really concerns me here is all these other little catchphrases that are being used. And I've got a few of them written down here. Focused development, limited areas. There's too much elasticity there. Let's get specific. I don't like the word densification. In fact, it raises alarm bells with me. But we need to get away from all these fancy phrases which sound great but don't do anything. Because then you're going to get the question from me and everybody else, well, what does this actually mean? Patrick, I've asked a question this morning. What does this mean? What does that mean? That's what we don't need. If we can focus on plain English in these reports, we're going to get a lot further and a lot quicker. And that's the only thing that I'm seeing so far. But otherwise, I like what I'm seeing here.
Great, thank you. And Director Kuhn.
Yeah, yes, I like what is being presented. I think we should try to stay away from trying to nail everything down for the next 20 years. I think that's an illusion. Even if, let's say, this section with the larger lots that's not in the containment boundary area now, if some developer came along with an incredible plan that would also consolidate some of the sewer and water, even if it was outside the containment boundary, I could imagine we would just change our minds. And that's what this is all about. I mean, we're here to make decisions. We're not here to set up a plan so that future boards for the next 10, 15, 20 years are bound to totally adhere to this plan. This plan it's a guide. That's what it is. And because I've had it happen in my area where a development took place outside the containment boundary, and it was welcome. I like this idea. I would stay away from trying to include everything now in the containment boundary area, because maybe in 20 years we want to expand that's not the whole purpose of a containment boundary. I think we're trying to concentrate in that area. Yet if something unbelievable comes along, I could imagine we would just say, okay, let's extend the boundary area. So that's my comment.
Okay, thank you for that comment, Director Kuhn. Okay, Director Wilson.
Yeah, this is great. Director Kuhn there has hit the nail on the head here. Flexibility, not rigidity. We need to be able to move quickly with, of course, the proper kind of thought. But as he says, if we plan for 20 years ahead, great stuff and all the rest of it, you're tying everybody's hands. No, let's plan, but let's not make it so unflexible that nobody can do anything. And that's a great point.
Great, thank you. Seeing no other, just have one specific question myself, Patrick. So that piece, Ingot Road, I think it is, that you took out of the growth containment boundary. Can you just speak to that briefly? Why did that come out? Yeah, that piece there.
So one of the reasons that we decided to take that out is given it is a long singular road that is poorly connected really to the rest of the village area. We felt that any kind of future growth in that area may actually just be in a more kind of sprawling nature, essentially forcing people into their cars to drive down Inglet Road. It felt like it was a little bit too much to include, and I think when we look at Shawnigan Lake and Electoral Area B right now, there is quite a bit of growth containment boundary that's been added already in comparison to the existing growth containment boundary. There has been some fairly significant changes in relation to land use and density and potential growth in this area because so it is a question of scale and how much do we really how much can we really achieve over the next 20 years? And perhaps wanting to really focus in on areas like where the Shawnigan Lake Village charrette indicated, this idea of a vibrant village center, wanting to really ensure that can happen before, future kind of development further out from the village can kind of take precedence over that. So it is a question of priorities, and I think in terms of the capacity that we have just in this potential growth containment boundary here, I think we have, quite a bit of capacity already. So,
right. Okay. Thank you. So, did I miss any questioners? No, seeing none. Okay, go ahead, Patrick, please.
Great. Thank you. And also just to note, it is. Any kind of development proposal is always at the director's discretion. So whether or not it's in the growth containment boundary, as Director Coons was saying, there's always in the future the opportunity to present an OCP amendment as part of a development proposal, and so that always becomes the discretion of yourselves as directors. We can certainly have policy that explains, support for certain types of OCP amendments, and I think it's something that's important to note.
Mr. Chair, question. So bringing.
Excuse me. Can I just interrupt for a minute? I just have a text from Lori. She's been trying to get in. I don't know if she's here yet or not.
Oh, okay.
Just a point of clarification.
I made it in, thank you.
She is in. Thank you.
You're here, Lori? Okay, good. All right, go ahead, Director.
Mr. Chair, could I say something quickly? Sorry.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you. To that point of, the director can approve, or it would be directors, but I would hope that through this modernized OCP, we could actually strengthen and deter that from happening, and really ensure that that doesn't happen, because we're a mess right now in Area B. Because of that, we have pockets of really high development that happened all over the place without proper servicing, and it's created these little communities that are off on their own, that some don't even have a park, some, it's been, and we can't, there's no amount of good design that can kind of fix these errors later on. So I hope that we can actually strengthen it so that it's not so that people don't try and rezone areas that shouldn't be.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chair, could I just comment on that as well? It's Lori here.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I just, I agree with Director Acton. I think that's the problem, how we have these subdivisions up in no man's land. Transit is a mess, because how can we possibly have transit up in these places and all over? So I think that we seriously need to look. This is the reason why we're doing this. And I think, sure, maybe some changes, but when you leave it to directors, that's exactly how we need a guide as directors. Thank you.
Right, good. And both of those also kind of answer my question earlier about the Ingot Road piece that we've now left out. So great. Patrick, please.
Great, thank you. I will move on now to electoral areas D and E. So in this case, there is a little bit of an expansion. You'll notice in the Cowichan Bay Village, a bit of an expansion, sort of consolidated or creating a bit of a contiguous growth containment boundary around the village, but also towards the marina. And then we've taken out the growth containment boundary from some of these small little parcels adjacent to the highway, understanding that those are already developed. They're mostly commercial properties, and we don't really anticipate that to really change much. It's not really a place where I think we want to have people living right next to a highway. So I think that that's fair. And then also just a quick, an expansion of the growth containment boundary out into the Eagle Heights area here, and that whole industrial sort of area that has been developed already. And so a few pockets just south of Cowichan Bay Village here that have been formalized or that have been kept. We didn't feel like it was responsible to essentially expand the growth containment boundary out to those areas, because there is ALR land that sort of separates them. So they will sort of remain as sort of little islands. So that's the growth containment boundary for electoral areas D and E. Any questions or thoughts at all about this one? Maybe a little less complex or worthy of I mean, still worthy of discussion, but still maybe less complex than the other three.
Okay. Okay, questions, anyone? Allison or Lori?
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
When I look at the Eagle Heights, and I'm sorry, I can't, this isn't big enough for me to really see. There are a couple of subdivisions that butt up against the reserve land along Glenora Road, I guess it is. And I'm just wondering, they look to me like they would have, I'm wondering if they are on the city water or not, and the sewer.
I'm not exactly sure at this point.
So just on the west there.
Kind of in this area here?
Yeah.
I see Mr. Rob Grant in the chat says they are.
Okay.
Okay, so it strikes me that the growth containment boundary should probably reflect the existing servicing that we have there, which is water and sewer. Yeah, I missed that before.
So where the growth containment boundary is identified by Patrick, that is where the First Nation boundary is. So that's where the Electoral Area E jurisdiction ends.
Okay, great. That's perfect then. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on this one? Can't see anybody, but I don't hear anybody, so I think we're okay.
Excellent, thank you. Now let's move on to S and I. So here we are looking at an extension. So again, in yellow is the existing growth containment boundary, and in red is where we're proposing for some expansion. So in the case of UBO and Electoral Area I, you can see that it would now sort of expand out to Lake Town Ranch and sort of create this sort of contiguous area all the way up to the UBO Village site. In terms of Electoral Area I, we would be connecting Honeymoon Bay along the South Shore Road to Massachi Lake, and including several properties in between the two village areas. This is something that we may have to look at this a little bit more closely, because there is quite a bit of ALR land in this area, and so we included them at the in talks with Director Morrison. However, it may be quite challenging to exclude those parcels. I know currently the ALC is not favorable to any kind of exclusions for the most part, so it is quite a challenge, even if it does come through a sort of community plan and a community process, but certainly something worthwhile discussing. We've included the golf course as well, and yeah, even golf courses apparently are very difficult to get out of the ALR. So there are a few properties in here. We may have to take a bit of a closer look as we move forward with these proposed GCBs. Just wanted to highlight that. There's also a small subdivision here just north of Cowichan Lake Village here that we felt was of a density and of a type of subdivision that would make sense to include within a GCB.
Okay. My question from Ian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. After our meeting, I've been reflecting on, sort of the aims and objectives here, and it doesn't appear on this map, but looking to the Old Lake Cowichan Road, there are some historic subdivisions in there that, haven't proceeded due to lack of servicing, but there's, as you get closer towards the east of the island, there's additional development pressure. So it's not on this map, it's just to the east of the location here, but is there a rationale to look at the roadside near Highway 18, near Old Lake Cowichan Road, to include areas that, like, there's a small distinct community called 3 Mile, there's a small distinct community called 4 Mile, and it essentially goes alongside the old highway and Highway 18 right out to the Scotts Falls turnoff area. I'm not suggesting that as you go towards the river that you include those sorts of areas, but alongside there is the potential once again to run sewer. It wouldn't be a area F sewer, but it could be the town of Lake Cowichan. Is there good rationale for not including those?
We would have to look. I mean, it's the rationale may be that, you know, it would have to be pretty close, I think, to some form of, I mean, if it's close to Cowichan Lake, the village, then, you know, maybe there is a rationale to say that you're close enough that it's a short drive to get services, to get amenities. I think that's sort of our main concern is having sort of little pockets of development that are quite far from amenities and services and kind of require folks to kind of drive long distances to get to where they need to be or to have any form of employment nearby. So, you know, I think that certainly is something that we would want to look at.
I can connect with staff afterwards, offline.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, and I see Klaus also has a question.
Yeah, I wonder, are we going to talk about zoning later on, or could I bring that in now?
We'll have the land use designation maps in the next
section. I have a question for later then. That's okay.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I don't see any other questions for now. So Patrick, please. Oh,
sorry, I'm not good on the chat. I have when I look at the UBO one, I'm wondering, it seems extremely ambitious from the point of view of servicing potential for all that area, that new area in pink. And I'm wondering what we've done in terms of talking to the First Nation and Lake Cowichan about these proposals or these draft lines. Yeah.
Okay, Patrick.
I think it would be very important to consult with Lake Cowichan and obviously the First Nations to understand whether there's servicing capacity that could be drawn in from there. But from maybe Brian has a bit of commentary that he could provide in relation to infrastructure in sort of this area here close to Lake Town Ranch.
So we have, so with the Woodland Shores development, there is a functioning sewer system there. Otherwise, there isn't. The Lake Town Ranch people have a proposal they're trying to bring forward for a kind of affordable housing type of an arrangement there, that in which they would provide sewer and water services, although at a very simple level, I would say. At least on the sewer side. So there's a few bits and pieces there. I wouldn't say we have any kind of comprehensive plan for it, and would necessarily know, you know, capacities and whatnot. My understanding from the Flynn Row people is that Cowichan Lake, at least until a new weir is established, Cowichan Lake, the Cowichan River, the whole system, all the groundwater is considered allocated. So I don't know how successful any further you know, groundwater licenses will be, at least in any kind of time frame longer than a number of years. However, if the weir does get replaced, then that argument perhaps could be looked at again, and they might be willing to look at new surface water licenses and things of that nature. On the sewer side, you know, I know that the Woodland Shores area works very well. We have infiltration basins and it works fine, so that could be expanded, but we don't have any particular plan for that at this point in time. And the developers only provided the capacity essentially for the development. So if there were others trying to join into that, we would have to look at some means of expanding the capacity to suit. So there's a little bit there, some bits and pieces, but not any comprehensive plan at this point.
I have some comments, please.
Can I just follow up?
Should we just have the follow-up first from Allison, and then we'll go to you, Klaus?
Yeah, so I think this speaks to the conversation we had at Shawnigan Lake, and whether having such an expanded growth containment boundary perhaps sends the wrong message for the next 20 years or so, if we're not able to adequately pull the servicing together in a reasonable way. So I'm a little bit nervous about some of this.
Okay, Klaus, please.
Yes, there was an effort made way back. I think there was around 2008 or 2006, where there was talk about connecting the industrial area, which is on the other side of the road, to the town sewer, and also to try to get water from there as well. It kind of fell apart because it turned out to be too expensive at the time, and there wasn't enough development planned for the. There was talk about some kind of chicken processing plant or whatever. That was many years ago, and it turned out that that wasn't enough. Wouldn't provide enough resources to justify the expansion. But I imagine if any development went ahead in that growth containment boundary area there, which is bordering on the industrial side, I imagine that could be all done in one swoop and connected to Lake Caution. I'll have to talk to the Lake Caution band to see how they're connected. I don't know if they're connected to the Lake Caution water supply or sewer, or if I presume they are. So I'll have to find out. But there's a possibility of connecting all the way down, then from the industrial side all the way down along the road right into town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I may, I mean, one of the good news stories about including some of these parcels into the growth containment boundary is they're primarily large lots, big large lots that are today, I think, under forestry and resource as a designation. And so should these redevelop, it would likely be in the form of a rather large comprehensive development that would have to really seek out proper services. It wouldn't be sort of, a small subdivision on septic or something like that. I think it would likely be a bit of a more comprehensive development.
Okay. All right, any further comments on F and I? Okay, hearing none, over to you, Patrick.
All right, and I just wanted to note this real quickly because Paldi often falls off the map, but we also included the Paldi area here as part of Electoral Area F in that growth containment boundary, understanding that there is an application or there has been an application, and any kind of development here would be some form of big comprehensive development, a master plan of some sort. So I just wanted to note that as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm just wondering, it's 2:30. Should we have a 10-minute break before we jump to the next? Let's.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're live.
Okay, thank you. Welcome back, everyone. So we'll turn back to Patrick and his slides.
Thank you. Just share my screen once again.
Thank you.
I think we had covered Paldi already. Moving into Electoral Area G. Here we have a growth containment boundary that has been, from last time that we spoke in October, has been greatly reduced, really only to cover some of those land use designations, I believe, that are under that community, country, suburban residential designation. So it also intends on essentially keeping any kind of future subdivision potential really within this smaller area. And so, yeah, the rest of the Saltaire area would essentially become rural in character, essentially establishing that sort of green belt that we were hoping to achieve here in Saltaire. So any questions or thoughts at all about this?
Well, since it's my area, I'd like to just jump in. And we didn't have a chance to go over this new growth containment boundary. My appointment was for today, and to make sure Patrick was in the meeting today and finding something that would work. So he was unable to attend, and so I don't think we had a very fulsome discussion in regards to it. So I think that this isn't really the containment area at the moment. It's just it needs further discussion so that we can see, a little bit more so that Patrick can explain some things to me, because the decision was made and we haven't, or this map was put together, and I think it's good that if we have a little bit more conversation on it in the future.
So it entails the commercial properties along the road here, and then the rest of these properties are either that country, suburban land use designation, and I believe there's maybe one or two sort of medium lot, residential medium lot, suburban as well, that are representative of a mobile home park of some sort. So it's really quite low in density. I don't think there's going to be much subdivision potential at all within those designations at all. It's really just intended to say that these are where the designations that have the potential for like redevelopment or densities of up to 2.5 units per hectare. So something really quite small, hardly any growth, hardly any potential for much really, but it's we're just encircling it, given the logic of the designations and given the logic of the GCB.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions on Area G? No? Okay, sounds like more discussion to be had. Go ahead, Patrick.
Excellent. So moving into Electoral Area H, here we have essentially the village of Diamond that is located within the growth containment boundary.
Excuse me, is Ben here? Oh, okay. Now he's here. All right.
Okay. Good. He says he has a question when when you're finished, Patrick.
So earlier on, the last time we had met, we had also put in sort of the chuck wagon subdivision out here within the growth containment boundary, with the intent of sort of formalizing that fairly small lot subdivision that exists there, and looking for potential solutions to what is a bit of a water servicing challenge in this area. What you'll notice is in the new land use designations map, we've actually put in an infrastructure and servicing overlay over top many of these properties here that are currently struggling with water servicing, to show that we'll need to study this area a little bit further to determine how best to service these lots, because I know in some cases there's water that's being trucked out to these properties. So, but in terms of the growth containment boundary, we are really just limiting it to the Diamond Village and some of these smaller lots that are adjacent to the town of Ladysmith.
And Ben, you had a question?
Thank you. And actually, it's just to thank Patrick and company for the incorporating the comments, and which changed the growth containment around the chuck wagon and removed it actually. There was some questions follow-up that we talked, our group talked about with what I think is that addition to the Diamond area to the left of the screen, which is called I think the Heart Lake development. Some comments there about it, just so you know that there's a Bush Creek runs through that property. And I think there's been a park dedication at the very bottom, of that, below the escarpment, but it's quite a steep bank going down to it. There's 2 hydro lines that run through the property, as well as the gas line. So yeah, there may be some capacity, but there's some areas there that are of concern in terms of how would you incorporate it and how would you provide it. So I didn't know if you were aware of that. I'll forward that email comments to you so you have it in writing through Coralie.
Absolutely. That's a really great comment. And in the land use designations, which you'll notice is we have now taken out much of those lands that that have an application or have been developed, and it's now surrounded by a green parks and open space designation. So it's not so while the whole lot is included within the growth containment boundary, much of those areas that I think you're speaking of that are on steep slopes or have been dedicated as park are now formalized as parks and open space in the designation.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions on Area H? Oh, okay, Patrick.
Excellent. Well, that brings us to the end. We've gone through all the electoral areas now. So any other, I guess, final thoughts or comments, questions on the growth containment boundaries before we move into the land use designations?
Okay, if you pop your screen down now, please, then we can.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no hands and no chat. If you're ready, Patrick, I guess we can move on to the land use part.
Excellent.
Sorry, I was delayed there.
Oh.
Can I speak?
Yeah, Director Acton, go ahead.
Yeah, so I really want to understand how so it's kind of what Director Nicholson was talking about, or that I brought up about ensuring that poor development doesn't happen, for one, and to ensure that none, especially in Shawnigan's case, and I'm glad Director Wilson's not here to take offense to this, but seeing all that development in Cobble Hill that actually doesn't have servicing is really concerning, and it's created like it looks like a whole urban explosion. So I really, how are we going to ensure that that doesn't happen in Shawnigan Lake, where the containment boundary has almost doubled, and which I think is a good suggestion, but only if there is sewer and lots of ways that and ensuring that there's lots of language that encourages people to either get the sewer developed, and then once it is developed, that it happens, because right now our OCP allows all kinds of development because we thought we would have sewer by now. And we don't. So I'm really concerned about it.
Yeah. And I think what we can do is ensure that there's really strong policy in the OCP that speaks to the need for servicing within these growth containment boundaries before we start allowing greater kind of subdivision, greater growth in these areas. So we can certainly take a look at that, make sure that there's a robust policy framework that goes along with those growth containment boundaries, and hopefully as well. I mean, it is a question of also negotiating with developers and ensuring that that is happening properly.
Okay, follow up.
And to consider those areas that Director Yanni DiNardo called the ones out in no man's land. We have a whole bunch of those, and considering those, how are we going to fix those? What are we going to encourage that happens maybe around them, so that we can start working towards fixing those errors? And then also, we did not talk about this today, but development along the Coxsila being especially like on Area B side, I've had some developers really pushing to develop in that area, and we don't have any really strong policy that says no, we're not doing it because of the pressure that's on the Coxsila right now.
Okay. I don't know if Patrick wants to comment, or we'll go to Director Nicholson if you don't.
I think maybe just a note to say that that it is part of the future work plan, I believe, of Corley's team to explore a watershed based local area plan around the Coxsila Coxsila area and watershed. So that certainly could be explored in further detail. We have and we can certainly include some higher level policies in the OCP at this stage, but I think that's going to be the planning exercise to really address some of the challenges around water supply and drainage and all of that around the Coxsila River.
Okay, Allison.
I think that's great, but to speak to Sierra's concern, I think that this really hinges on the out-of-date zoning that we're going to have for the next few years, and so it does really worry me if we don't make some changes to that sooner rather than later.
Okay, any more comments before we move to the next section? No, good, okay. Thanks, Patrick.
All right, so I'm just going to share my screen once again here. Moving on to land use. Again, just as a quick refresher, of course, the official community plan, it sets policy direction, it has land use designations, and it includes a certain type of high-level framework around densities and uses. So it designates areas for community needs, whether it's residential, commercial, industrial farms, natural open spaces, and so on. It's the zoning bylaw that starts to regulate really how things are built and operated. So it includes, you know, the specific types of uses within the designation that can be that can be explored within that building. It also governs building heights, sizes, locations, and setbacks. So it's really about the box in which we can develop. And then finally, there's development permit guidelines that really offer that special design direction in relation to not only form and character, but also in relation of protection from natural hazards and protection of the natural environment, so that any kind of development that does occur is done in a responsible manner. So that's just a quick refresher on sort of the three main layers of regulation that exist as it relates to land use. So you'd noticed in the modernized official community plan that we are following this organizing framework of the transect that goes from resource and natural spaces through to urban spaces, sometimes even a downtown, though we would argue that in the CVRD's electoral areas, the downtowns don't exist. Those are in the incorporated municipalities of Ladysmith, Lake Cowichan, Duncan, and North Cowichan. So much of the actual electoral areas really fit within, the resource and natural area, the rural and agricultural spaces, and the suburban areas. Well, maybe touching into village areas in some places, but very rarely heading into urban conditions and downtown conditions where you have, multi-story mixed-use type of buildings. So we're really focusing a lot on these sort of first four types of transect sub-areas. We're looking at typical density thresholds. This is helping us really understand the land use designations and how they relate to the growth containment boundary. So we have rural type of areas that fit under that 1 unit per hectare density threshold. Then we get into sort of suburban areas, really ranging from 1 UPH to 30 units per hectare. And then that's when we get into those urban or village type of land use patterns. And so with that framework, we were then able to inform these new land use designations and consolidate them from approximately 166 of them into around 21. The last time we saw you, we were at 20, and we've now added a land use designation called country suburban, which fits right sort of at the lower end of that scale of the suburban sort of transect area, and you'll see a little bit more detail in relation to that. But we think this is, these 21 land use designations are really sort of a good set of palette. It's a palette essentially to paint the electoral areas, and it's a good set of colors to essentially do so. I don't think we need to expand much more beyond this. I think this is your good basic planning tools here. So again, 8 residential land use designations. I believe I've gone over these at the last meeting, but I just wanted to highlight that there is this new country suburban land use designation now that is being used throughout the electoral areas. So this one here, we're really focusing on single detached homes in that designation with a maximum of about 2.5 units per hectare, so about half of the large lot suburban one. Oops, sorry. So again, this was a suggestion from Director Smith, and so we've looked at lots throughout all the electoral areas that either have significant constraints in relation to the natural environment, to steep slopes, and in areas that perhaps aren't quite serviced yet and cannot really accommodate much more in terms of growth or potential for growth, but are still above that 1 unit per hectare threshold, and we want to make sure that that's possible to include them within the growth containment boundary. So this designation now appears on the land use maps that were forwarded to you. I thought Director Acton maybe with a question there.
Go ahead, Sierra.
Thank you. My question is that village core. It says, of course, when we get our amazing sewer system, it says apartment buildings up to 4 stories. Now, like, is that going to limit somebody? I could actually see parts of Shawnigan Lake where they might actually have like 6 stories in 20 years.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I think we limited it to 4 stories given the sort of, the desire for that rural character in these areas. I think oftentimes, in some of the communities that we work in, even in incorporated municipalities, oftentimes we see that when we go up to 6 stories, there's a lot of pushback on that. But if there's a desire and if there's a belief that 6 stories would be an appropriate height in some of these village centers, by all means, I think more density in that sense is certainly allows for more affordable housing, and it can be leveraged for certain infrastructure services as well. So I am personally in favor of that. I know sometimes that in more kind of rural locales, it can be quite the challenge to have people on board. So,
well, just to follow up, we're looking at land values that are millions of dollars and infrastructure that is as well. So just being able to I don't know, have a reasonable expectation. To me, I just think maybe there's maybe it says 4 to 6 stories then, or depending on how obviously they would be going for rezoning, but for it to be capped at 4, there might come a time when land is so expensive in Shawnigan Lake, essentially we're right beside Victoria, that it's not even feasible to do it unless it's at that kind of price. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
We certainly can look into expanding that height as a potential. It's not beyond the realm of possibilities for sure.
And I see Lori has a question as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Patrick. I just wonder where I see all the different designations, but what's important in my community is the large lots with houses on it that have the soils need to be protected so that we grow our own food for food security. Because while we are from ALR, now half-acre lots, where do we fit in here, or do we fit in here? Because I could have the half-acre lot and then I could put on 2 more houses, and I worry about that. I worry about that for the fact of the desperation of housing and farmland and all of that. So I'm just kind of thinking, are we in here at all in any of these designations?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Cowichan Bay Village is a bit of a gradation through multiple designations here. So you'll notice that in some places it is this country suburban, kind of a large lot, 2.5 unit per hectare, especially in places, and we'll look at the map a little bit further down the line here, but especially in places where there might be rolling hills, steep slopes, and there's just not really much potential for subdividing those types of lots. It could be also a bit of a hazard. And then there's large lot suburban, medium lot suburban. So we have a bit of a diverse palette of designations in the Cowichan Bay Village, all the way up to, I believe, a village residential, sort of almost in the core, the center of the village, where there are already some multi-unit buildings, some multi-story buildings there. So yeah, there is certainly within Cowichan Bay Village, I'd say, a large variety of designations.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I just, like, speaking to Director Actons, with the pressures we're going to have and the people that want to live here, I think it's really important that we always continue to think about food security and growing our own food. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Ian also has a question.
Yeah, just a quick one. And seeing we're in the residential, I think we should at least understand if and how tiny homes might fit into this, or whether or not there should be a mention in this description of our designations, or is that going to be addressed elsewhere or in policy?
Yeah, excellent. It's a great question. And so again, thinking about tiny homes, what makes them tiny is the envelope of the building itself. So it is a bit of a zoning bylaw issue. If you have a lot that can fit a certain amount of tiny homes, it might be, a lot that, the density might fit within the medium lot suburban. I think most of the mobile homes fit within the medium lot suburban designation. It might be a compact lot suburban designation. Ultimately, if the density of those tiny homes on a singular lot fit within the density provisions of that designation, then it works. As long as there's a zone that can allow for tiny homes, then depending on the density, we can fit them within any of these.
So just a quick follow-up. I get that, but that's counterintuitive to our, most of the population that may be large lot or small lot rural are thinking, no, they're perfect for a tiny lot addition.
Yeah, I mean, if the lot is big enough, it certainly can accommodate it. But yeah, I think we would probably avoid, tiny homes on, I guess, some of these. It sort of depends if the tiny homes are clustered, I guess is what I'm trying to say, right? So, and it's a question of density. So if, depending on how large the lot is, I mean, ultimately you could have a tiny home on a large lot in a rural area. If it is, one tiny home on, a 1 hectare lot, then it fits within the small lot rural designation. But ultimately, I guess what I'm trying to say is that nothing is preventing tiny homes from being built. It just needs to have a zone that can allow that type of building form. So I don't think that these designations would prevent any kind of tiny homes. And it really is a question around the zoning bylaw and whether it permits it. So that may not sound very convincing, but yeah, there's nothing in these particular designations that would prevent a tiny home from being built.
Okay, thank you. Next, I have Lynn with a question.
Thank you. No, I'd just like to make a comment. I think that Lori had a really good one in regards to making sure, as you know, as part of our strategic plan, food sustainability is really important. And we're not just looking at agricultural lands, we're looking at each person their own land, and what can you produce on your own land to sustain you. I mean, we have a very large garden on our parcel, and you know, we're so thankful because we look at the food prices for some of the items that, you know, squashes that we have for the winter, and you look at the price of them in the store, and something we grew is now $20-25 in the grocery store. So I think that the more that we encourage the use of land in that direction, one of the things I also think that's important is our natural assets, which most of us would know that this past summer with the heat dome, having vegetation on your property or trees helps shade your home and provide you with a cooling area, much different than if you're in one of these developments that is just beside each other and there is no opportunity to have your natural asset cool you. And another one is the natural assets are needed to slow down when we have these atmospheric rivers. We need to slow down the flow. And if you have only impervious areas between driveways and homes and only inches between each home, you have no place for the water to go. And most electoral areas don't have any drainage systems. And so it's really important that we have those natural assets to absorb as much of the moisture and slow it down with having the vegetation. I know that I saw Patrick shaking his head, yes, that is important. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. And if I may, I think, you know, we'll certainly have some policies in the OCP that speak to ensuring that folks can grow, you know, vegetable gardens. There may also be an opportunity to update the zoning bylaw to include things like, you know, having chickens and apiculture available as uses within single detached kind of properties. Even, you know, apiculture can also happen on rooftops of multifamily buildings, and so there's a lot of flexibility as to how we can allow the growing of vegetables, the growing of small scale sort of agriculture on residential lots. And I think that's something that we want to encourage in the OCP. So you'll see some policies in relation to that. And of course, our natural asset policy chapter, the main component is on the establishment of a natural asset framework for the Cowichan Valley, which would essentially look to calculating the value of the natural assets and allowing that to be a part of your asset management strategies in the future. Understanding that the natural environment provides services to residents and to communities. So if we can put a number on it, then it's more likely that it's going to be preserved and enhanced and you know, protected essentially. So that is a big aspect of that natural asset policy chapter, and we're really excited for that. And maybe just going back to Director Morrison's comment on tiny homes, I think one thing that we could potentially do, maybe to make it just more explicit, rather than just saying, you know, there's nothing that prevents it from happening, perhaps we could include in the description of the land use designations, you know, whether it's medium lot suburban all the way down to large lot rural, essentially saying that if the tiny home is desired on these lots, that the designation would allow that. So maybe putting it in the list of building types that are allowed, and then there would have to be some kind of subsequent zoning bylaw update to implement that.
Great, okay.
Blaise, just a moment. I just want to go back to the tiny homes because I don't believe that under the building permits, the tiny homes are recognized under that department. Can we just have clarification on that? Because I think if we're saying to people, oh, you can put a tiny home, are we talking about a small home, or are we talking about the homes that are called tiny homes that are on a trailer and can be pulled here and there, that are so?
Okay, I think
might
I did
ask
see Mr.
building,
McDonald.
Mr. McDonald.
I think I saw him on the call.
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if I caught her whole question, but I was listening earlier and I was wanting clarification myself. When you use the term tiny home, it's unfortunately referred to as, like Director Smith says, something on wheels. And I have been talking with planning saying it's preferable that you say a small footprint single family dwelling or something to that effect, so that you really know it's something on a foundation. So I hope that's what the clarification is, because no, the building code does not recognize the, I'll call it the quote unquote tiny home. So something that's on wheels.
Okay.
Through the chair, it would be defined by size as opposed to the nomenclature of tiny home. That's correct.
Okay.
But conceptually, we can support it in the OCP by referring to smaller homes.
All right, good. That answer your question, Lynn?
Yes, thank you for that clarification.
Okay, thank you, Ian, as well. All right, I don't see anyone else on this section, so Patrick, we can move along if you like.
Thank you. So besides the residential uses, we of course have 9 employment land use designations. So these include everything from small scale commercial, village commercial, tourist commercial, a mixed employment designation that essentially allows greatest amount of flexibility between some light industrial, office space, and commercial type buildings, primarily located along the highway. There's a couple industrial designations, one that's light industrial, another one that encompasses perhaps some of those more heavy industrial uses. There's a forestry and resources designation, of course, and agricultural, so lumped in there. I believe I've gone over this with you folks a little bit earlier on, but then we have 4 civic and open space land use designations. So in relation to infrastructure, institutional buildings like schools and recreation centers, places of worship, and then parks and open space. So those types of uses that prioritize gathering or the protection of the natural environment, and then water, of course, in terms of protecting water bodies. And I just wanted to show a couple or a few other sort of overlays that we've included in this round. I think it became clear as we were discussing with the electoral area directors that there needs to be perhaps another extra layer of information that signals to residents, to developers, to folks from around the electoral areas that some of these lots will require a little bit more thinking, a little bit more studying to ensure that that development is done in a proper way. And so these overlays are really just intended to add a little bit more detail to how a particular lot might redevelop. So there's 4 overlays in total. There are special study areas overlay, which include infrastructure and servicing. So that is, in this case, a way to further study ways to enhance servicing sustainability in locations that are outside of the growth containment boundary. So really the area sort of along the south end of Shawnigan Lake is a perfect example of that. There's these residential lots that are outside of the growth containment boundary, but we need to find a solution on how to service those properly so they aren't polluting the lake. And so we have created an infrastructure and servicing overlay to kind of show that. There's a few other spots like in Electoral Area H, right around the Chuck Wagon area, where this overlay would also apply. There's an overlay of potential ALR exclusions. So this is really about signaling the potential for exclusion of ALR lands if those lands are not actively farmed, if the soil is of poor quality, and if the location is really strategic for future growth and has servicing potential. So I think there's not a whole lot that we're marking on this. It's not it's not something that I think we want to encourage too much, but there are certain lots, I think specifically between Missachi Lake and Honeymoon Bay, where there really isn't any agriculture happening. The land is not great for it. There's poor soils, and there's going to be some really great servicing there in the future. And so there's an opportunity to perhaps ask the ALC if there's potential to take those lands out. And then finally, there's a comprehensive development overlay. So these are large greenfield parcels that really require a comprehensive development plan, that require a good amount of detail before we make any kind of decisions as to whether or not we want to amend the OCP. And so this includes things like the siting of buildings, mobility connections, and road network, parks, open spaces, and public spaces. And a good example of this one is the Duncan Airport in Electoral Area E, where I believe there's going to be a large sort of I think there's a gravel pit right beside it, but essentially it's a large development site there that that may eventually come on board, and we just want to signal that, you know, this isn't, we don't want this to happen in any old way. We want it to be done in a comprehensive master planned way. Similarly, the Yubo lands just to the east or west, I should say, of the Yubo village, where there's a sort of large sort of parcel there that could see some comprehensive sort of master planning type development. Finally, there's a new parks and open space overlay. This one was used really specifically for one parcel, I think in and around the Eagle Heights area, where there is a specific parcel in conversations with Director Nicholson that we had noticed is really important in terms of drainage, in terms of infiltration, that we would not want to lose through any kind of development that would occur there. So just indicating that this parcel here, should there be a development application that comes through, that there will have to be some form of dedication for a new park or open space that's in line with local community needs.
Okay, well, thank you for that. We'll just pause. So I have three of us, I think, Ian and then Laurie, and then I have a question myself. So Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. And I think this has brought to your attention an item that was in the Area F OCP, the outdoor rec park, noise park, motorsports park, whatever you want to call it, with the idea that it be fairly remotely located, not near any existing or future residential zones. Where would that fit in here?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, perhaps what we we'll need to really identify the parcel first. I think, you know, in conversation, it wasn't quite clear yet exactly which parcel is being contemplated for that. So we can either designate it, I think currently it's designated as forestry and resources. We can do it both ways. We can apply sort of a new parks and open space overlay on top of it, or it could also be, it might be more of an institutional use than it is a parks use, right? So there's a little bit of, yeah. So I think that's something, it might be tourist commercial even. That might be a designation that fits it a little bit better. So I think once we have a bit of a better idea of what it is, it may also just be a comprehensive development overlay that says, hey, we just want to understand a little bit more as to what the plans are for this, and should the master plan come in, then we'll have a better idea of whether or not an OCP amendment is supported.
Okay, follow up, Ian, or is that good? I think he's okay. All right, we'll go to Laurie, please.
Thank you. I caution the words poor soil when it comes to the ALR exclusions, because in the past I've seen that, and you know, it's not just about the soil, even though the soil is important when I spoke to the Lambourne area and not developing with other houses on top, but I caution that being used because you can, the chickens, the goats, the animal sheds. So I worry about that one. So I just wanted to just state that.
Thanks. And it's a really important comment. I mean, soil quality isn't the only thing that means that, you know, there's always the opportunity to use greenhouses on some of these lands, even if the soils are of poor quality. So I think that is something to consider for sure.
Yeah, thank you. So just on your previous slide, Patrick, there was, yeah, looking at parks and open space and water. So I was wondering, is there a designation that would serve to protect community drinking water sources? I'm thinking of the provincial designation where they have community watersheds. I don't know if you had a chance to think about that, but it would be interesting to see what we could do.
Yeah, I did notice that I believe there was and I assume that the protection of these community watersheds, those are across all sorts of properties. It's not just along the actual creek or waterway.
Yeah, it's a big sort of a blanket, like for a whole watershed. Like the Shawnigan watershed is one of the provincially designated ones.
Yeah, so I'm not sure that it would actually be a designation as much as what we could do is include an additional map in the OCP that says these are provincially protected watersheds, and here are a couple policies that relate to that map. That's certainly something that we could explore. I'm not sure that a land use designation is the best way forward for that, given that it would cover multiple parcels with different uses and different forms of development potential.
Okay, that's good.
Or lack of.
Right. Okay, next, oh, Ben says I asked his question. Okay. Lynn, you have a question.
Yes, thank you. So I'm glad that we're on this slide because it made me think of an email that I had received from a gentleman who showed water storage underneath parks and open spaces. And I'm wondering how that fits into if you have a land use designation for parks and open space, and then you create water storage underneath, and how does that fit into a land use designation?
So I'm not exactly sure what is meant by water storage underneath. I know of parks that can act as sort of a rainwater detention to essentially prevent flooding, and that is just a simple design of the park. I don't think it wouldn't have any kind of implication in relation to this. It just means that parks facilities would be designed in a way to detain water when there's large rain or storm events, and that's pretty common. That's becoming more common in many municipal and other types of parks. Is that sort of what was being asked in terms of detention?
It was the gentleman's an engineer from Japan, and he had sent information on how underneath a park in one of the cities in Japan, they were using it for the storage of water. And I know places like Mill Bay do have issues with water, and I'm just wondering if as we move through these land use designations, if we have a way of making sure that the parks can have those water storage units underneath them. And maybe Mr. Dennison might have something to say about that. Maybe he can give us an idea. Thank you.
Okay, Brian, if you're there.
Yeah, I can give it a try. So one of the things, if you're thinking about storing water to meet water demand in the summertime from the wintertime when we have a lot of water, the volumes involved are really, really large, and you rarely can actually build a structure. So if you're thinking about an underground structure like a big tank or something, the size of that, like, you know, say for Saltaire, if you're ever at Saltaire and you look at our reservoir there, and it's this giant tank, and that's one day of demand in the system. And to think of doing 60 of those is mind-boggling, and to have them below grade, it's not really that feasible. If you're thinking about storage, there's another idea though, and that is sort of pumped recharge of subsurface conditions, so that you can pump it out again. So in some cases, that's a new thing where in the wintertime, say you're actually pumping down a well or several wells into a subsurface area, like kind of like creating an aquifer that maybe wasn't there naturally, but you can store water in the materials, especially if it's sand and gravel, and then withdraw it later, and that's more feasible. That's a possible thing that could be done. It's a sort of new idea, and you'd need the right sort of geology for that, but it could be done. So that's a possibility. Maybe Mill Bay, that could be done. I don't know.
Okay, thanks for the sketch of that. Okay, so we're almost ready for another break. Patrick, how are you holding up? Are we?
I'm doing great. We essentially just have the maps of all the electoral areas and their land use designations at this point. So I'm happy to take a quick break and spend the rest of the hour that we have together just going over the land use maps, if that's what's
that makes sense. Okay, let's do that then. So I think we can start again. Kathleen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are live.
Great. Okay, welcome back, and I'll hand it back over to Patrick to carry on, please.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to share my screen. And so we are now at the point in the presentation where we will go over the land use designations or land use maps in each electoral area. So I'm going to full screen here. So we'll start off with in alphabetical order with Electoral Area A. So for most of the areas, what I've done is I've shown the entire map and then a bit of an inset. So as for Electoral Area A, some of the changes that we've applied since the last time that we spoke include the SCI lands just along the Malahat here. We may have to look at that a little bit further in detail after a really productive and constructive meeting with the Malahat First Nation. Some of these lands here are owned by the Malahat First Nation. There's intent there to eventually apply to have those included as part of the reserve lands. So, further conversations with the Malahat along that is certainly planned, and we want to make sure to respect some of those desires for the future of those lands, given they certainly have quite a bit of ambition in relation to economic development in that area. And then, yes, we also spoke a little bit about the potential for a special study area along this particular property here. I think that's something that we may be taking out of the plan, just as a not wanting to really signal that there's a desire or a community need for sort of large comprehensive development in this area, given some of the water scarcity in Mill Bay. But apart from that, really the intent here is to add a little bit or have a little bit of those higher density residential land use designations near the Mill Bay, the core of the Mill Bay village. So going from sort of a medium lot suburban, sort of on the outer edges, some room for a little bit of multifamily development right adjacent to the school and adjacent to the commercial sort of village that exists there today. But apart from that, understanding that there's not a whole lot of water availability in this area, so we don't want to push that too far. So any questions at all around Electoral Area A?
Oh, don't see any. Thank you, Patrick. That's great.
Yes,
and
sorry.
Oh, okay, sorry. But Sierra,
I just have a comment. Are you able to kind of zoom in more so that we can see it on our end better?
I'm not sure if I can do that. I may be able to.
Well, through your view, yeah, something like that maybe. Because I just don't know I can't even read what the colors are. So what the designations are by color. Oh, there, that's looking better.
Yeah, it's a bit better, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Good, and yeah, it's great to hear you're consulting with the Malahat First Nation. That's very important too, so it's great, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna try and ensure that we can zoom into these. Moving on to Electoral Area B. So you'll notice the lands that we had originally spoken about just south of Baldy Mountain Road here, they're currently small lot rural, but I think if we were to bring them into the GCB, we would explore a higher density, probably large lot suburban type of designation. Essentially what we've done with Shawnigan Lake is, as I mentioned, all those residential lands that are just on the southern edge of Shawnigan Lake outside of the growth containment boundary. You'll see there's a hatch there. That's indicating a special study area for infrastructure and servicing. So understanding that we need a solution there to protect the lake. Since the last time we spoke, we've also reduced some of the densities, especially around the village core. On the northern edge of the lake and a little bit, along Shawnigan Mill Bay Road, specifically to protect some of that rural character that I think is very important around Shawnigan Lake. There was there's a few subdivisions that have happened in the past that feel a little bit too urban, a little bit too compact. So we want to make sure that the lots are large enough and retain that character. And then we also, and I'll just maybe zoom into the inset on this side here to show. We've also worked to align the village area with the village plan charrette that was conducted a little while ago. So you have very specific properties that are slated for village commercial. A property here where I believe is really the main focus of the charrette, a sort of village residential designation with an overlay for a new park, because that seemed to be a very big component of the charrette there. So yeah, I think that really lays out the vision for land use here in Electoral Area B.
Sarah?
Yeah, so thanks. So Patrick, but to your comment about the lots being size, it was more about developments that have been built out to the lot line, more like the size of houses, the houses being too big for the neighborhood and too modern
It's a question of ratio between the lot size and the home size, right? And so what we can do is ensure that the densities allow for a little bit of a larger lot, but then there's also a question of zoning that's going to be a big component of making sure that the homes don't max out that entire lot. So that it needs to be a bit of both. It can't just be the land use designations that'll impact that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions on Area B? No. Okay.
Oh, I think it's our Director Nicholson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have a question. It's not in the Shawnigan proper. It's the Coxsila area over to the west.
So sort of in this.
Yeah, so it seems to me that it would be, it looks to me like this is small lot rural. And it seems to me that anything along the river corridor should be large lot rural. I don't think that we want to encourage any more subdivision along there.
Yeah, that's a great observation. We can certainly take a look at that, see if there's subdivision potential, and even if there isn't, we can certainly look at perhaps broadening that. I think the large lot designation has often been used along riversides, so that certainly would make sense, especially in the case of the Coxsila.
And my other comment might be to take a look at the agriculture. Some of I can't really see, but I think some of that in the just north of Shawnigan Lake, that sort of square on the west side, some of that is steep hillside, so it doesn't really make sense to keep it as agriculture, I don't think.
Yeah, we'll have to look. It might also be that it's a piece of that's in the ALC, in the LR, and it's just the way it is. And yeah, so we can take a look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on Area B? Okay, thank you.
Right, so moving into Area C, a bit of an overview. Not a whole lot has changed since the last time we spoke. I think we've simply we've reduced a little bit of the designation or densities around the Cobble Hill Village. So you have a little bit more of the medium lot suburban here as opposed to the compact lots kind of dominating. And then we've also highlighted this property here just at the edge of Couch and Bay Road, and I believe it's Shearing Road, because there has been talks of potentially having an affordable housing co-op of some sort in this particular location. So we really wanted to ensure that that would be possible on that lot. But apart from that, I think, you know, one of the big features in the Cobble Hill area is this particular new employment node that we're designating as mixed employment with some multi sort of family housing potentially in the form of townhouses or apartments sort of right next to it. We believe that given the proximity to the highway, this is a really excellent place to potentially have a new node of employment for electoral areas in the South Cowichan, essentially.
Okay.
Any
question?
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, my video's not on. What is the Peach area, Patrick?
Large lot suburban.
And so that large lot area below this family working area you just mentioned, it looks quite developed. Like, how will you service that? It would be all connected to the village?
Yeah, I believe so. So I think as it is, I mean, maybe Brian can speak a little bit to this, but I think Cobble Hill Village is quite well serviced, and I'm not sure if it yet connects over the highway, but certainly there would be, I feel like it would be quite easy to draw, especially if we have some development in this area along the highway, whether it's industrial or commercial buildings or multifamily buildings right next to it, to draw a pipe from sort of the village area south this way.
And what road is that? Can you point out one of the roads so we know where we are?
So this here is Chapman Road. If we look at the inset here, it's a little bit easier perhaps.
What's the next one on the highway?
This is Hutchinson Road here.
Okay, thank you.
And then this is Chapman Road.
Okay, so Allison?
So that's quite a change to add another busy place along the highway. And it's sort of counter to keeping the traffic moving through, developing another node. So
I see Brian's popped up about the sewer connection possibility, I guess.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like me to speak to that, I can say that, so the improvement district there's two actually on both sides of the highway, Braithwaite on the east side and then Cobble Hill Improvement District on the west side providing water. I'm not sure of Braithwaite's status. I personally think that Cobble Hill has quite a lot of capacity. They need to increase their storage reservoir capacity in order to provide for the higher densities that would be seen here and the industrial. But that's just a matter of some money. But otherwise, I believe the aquifer is good in the area, and I think they have some pretty good future potential for water supply. Our sewer system has quite a bit of surplus capacity, and the only thing is extending and we would like to see a pipeline extend along either Fisher Road or Fairfield Road to the east side of the highway so that we can connect in our Maple Hill system. So if it went along, sorry, not Fisher Road, but Hutchinson, then it could quite easily tie in that area. And if we did that, then we could also enable use of the existing disposal field for Maple Hills for even more capacity for the future. So it's all quite doable, a bit of money, but definitely doable.
And maybe just to speak to Director Nicholson's comments around the development of an employment node next to the highway. This is definitely in a reflection of some of the needs that were identified by staff, specifically around economic development and the need for a greater amount of employment lands that are closely connected to the highway. As we know, this is also a really great transit corridor that's going to be further developed for transit in the future. So I would say that's the justification that we're using here. Is I think our economic development department has certainly noted that we need to have some employment lands in certain areas, and this might be a really great location for that, sort of central to both Cobble Hill, Shawnigan Lake, and also Mill Bay, really, and along the highway. So,
okay. Awesome.
I'm just a bit nervous about this. We've got all that development happening by the Malahat Nation, and we already have all these little nodes along the highway. And one of the issues with our region is our viewscapes and our lands, and people being able to move. And I don't know if we want more sort of development along the highway. And that area isn't really very developed right now. So this is quite a change.
Okay. Yeah, Mike Wilson's not here to chip in, but I'm sure there'll be other opportunities. But I don't know, Patrick, if you had any comments on that last point.
Yeah, I think, we've spoken to Director Wilson about this, and there certainly seemed to be support for it. I think, we're planning for growth, and we're planning for, an increase in jobs as well, and putting those jobs in places that are close to where people are living is certainly an important aspect of our strategy, close to where transit services is located, close to village centers. So I think it's a well-suited location, but I'm also open to exploring other potential lands for this type of development. But it is, of course, it's a challenge to find good lands for future office space or commercial nodes. So it's certainly something to explore, and ultimately, the idea is that we'd be bringing this to community circles, and it's not the be-all end-all of these land use plans, right? So there will be a round of engagement. There will be an opportunity for residents to have their say and to express whether or not this is something that they'd like to see or not.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Okay, so seeing no further Area C questions, I think we could move on.
So moving into Electoral Area D, I think we had spoken a little bit about this, just the kind of diversity of land uses that we have in Cowichan Bay Village. And so you'll see this kind of lighter yellow as sort of that country suburban designation. So really the lowest density in those areas that are close to steep slopes or on steep slopes, in those rolling sort of valleys that aren't really suitable for further subdivision. The the large lot suburban designation in certain strategic locations. And then as you get closer to sort of the village core, those densities increase a little bit. Not a whole lot of potential along these areas that are already developed, but mostly just a reflection of what's there already. And then yes, some village core residential sort of within the village, and then yeah, a little bit of commercial village development just where that exists already and at the marina here. And so we can zoom into that. Sorry. Any comments or thoughts at all on this?
Not hearing any, must be good.
No, sorry. I started writing in the chat and then I was just waving my hands. Yeah, it's difficult with the screen, but I just wanted to speak to the commercial piece of property that's beside the Cherry Point Marina. So that's the Cherry Point Marina, but then you have the Wilkuma Lodge that's right beside it.
The Wilkuma Lodge? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's currently not designated commercial, but it probably should be, is what you're saying.
Yes, that piece was in our last OCP, and yeah.
We can take a look at that and certainly explore redesignating that to something that's more appropriate, given it's already a lodge. Absolutely.
Yeah, it was already a lodge, and I just wanted to speak to that from the community, because it was, well, maybe 5 years ago or less than 5 years ago that we did our OCP. The community had said, well, they would have really liked like a boutique hotel. They also, you could see the high density area there too. There is no servicing, there's no sort of pubs, grocery store, anything, and so that area doesn't have any servicing. They have to go quite a ways to Valley View, which we're very happy to have in Cobble Hill. But yeah, that's what the community had said in the past, and I think it was very valuable. But we can see what the community circles come out with, but that was commercial. Thank you.
Okay, great. I think we would probably try and change the designation before we go into the community circles with that one in particular. So we'll try and get that fixed prior to that. Thanks.
Okay. Anything else on Area D? No. Okay, we'll carry on then.
All right, so moving to Area E. So really here, I think the main thing that I'd like to just note is we have removed this. I think this is the inset, is about as close as we can get. We've removed this particular property right up against the river from not only the growth containment boundary, but we've given it a large lot rural designation to prevent any kind of development happening. We know this is in the floodplain, and it's just not a very apt location for further development or subdivision. I spoke about the new parks overlay just on this property here, which would essentially ensure that should any development happen here, that we're protecting a big chunk of land for specifically, I think in this case, drainage issues. And then we've also added a special study area overlay just over the gravel pit because there is potential plans there for some development. So apart from that, I believe, yeah, we had removed some of those little triangles along the highway from the growth containment boundary, and I think that is it. Questions, thoughts?
Allison.
Thank you. So you've put in this village residential, which is the dark brown, and the one that's just along Allenby Road, I am a little bit nervous about that because that's a unstable slope. And I recognize that as we move sort of south along Allenby Road, the slope diminishes, but I think that I think when you look at the satellite view, that whole area has got some vegetation that probably shouldn't be lost, given the issues with the soil and the stormwater drainage that we're having in that area. So I'm a little bit nervous about having that. That's potentially such a higher density area at the moment. And I actually think this whole area desperately needs a neighborhood plan. We need to go out to the community and talk to them about some of these changes, and in the context of stormwater management and the need to improve the fish friendliness of the light industrial area, and also recognize that some of that light industrial is actually would probably be better identified as commercial at this point. And yeah, there's just a lot of thought that needs to go into this whole area. And I don't really want to see us put forward suggestions until there's been some proper study done of it.
Okay. So Patrick, any comments? Or that's just something we'll do?
So I guess I would need a little bit of direction in that sense of, not showing any kind of proposals before a more detailed study would happen. I wonder how to go about in terms of the process of the MOCP. And I don't know if maybe that's a question for Coralie, but just wondering about how we move forward with say the community circles without presenting any kind of particular land use map or a proposal.
Well, can I just ask you what your rationale for that village residential along Allenby was? And particularly because it butts up against what is probably already village residential in density up above there. So it's almost like, I'm not quite sure what the rationale is.
Yeah, so one of the things that can actually benefit the protection of the natural environment or some of these steep slopes is when you designate a parcel of land or a general area with a higher density, it means a smaller building footprint with a little bit of an apartment building, for instance, can, or whether it's townhouses, when you bring those units closer together and you create a bit of a multi-unit building as opposed to single detached buildings, you can protect a lot more land from those types of uses than if it's a single detached type of form, because in that case, then you have, maybe a couple dozen single detached homes that cover this larger area, right? So a multi-unit building would actually end up taking up smaller footprint on that land, and we would have more land available for the protection of these steep slopes, for the protection of some of these sort of large tree stands as well. That's a little bit of the justification. It's not as intuitive as I think it sometimes seems, but it certainly is something that we try to do on some of these difficult sites, is if we can really squeeze some of that density into a multi-unit building and then protect the rest of the site, that's sometimes a benefit to the natural environment, to the slopes, and to those types of things. So.
Okay.
Good. Thank you. Other questions?
It's me again, Lori.
Hi, Lori.
Hi. I just back to Area D. My apologies. I just had some questions after the fact, and looking at the map and then going to area. It goes up into area across from Area E, because Area D goes up to Boys Road to Duncan.
Yeah.
So it goes all the way up. So I have, my question is, when we had done our former OCP update, we always had, we had a group of people that stayed together, and then we went out to the public, a group of residents, but we always included the Cowichan Tribes. We had a Cowichan Tribes staff member at that time that was on all of the meetings and that. How are we connecting up with them, considering Cowichan Bay probably has the largest Cowichan tribes members. We have 50 acres right in the village. We're connected. Boys Road is connected. And we also have Theek, and Cobble Hill has Petrolis. Has there been, or will we be communicating with them at all, or has that already happened?
Patrick.
Or would that be part of our engagement?
Yeah, through the chair, that we have had conversations even as recently as last week. And we will continue to have consultation, and Ali Garnett will talk about that in her staff report on engagement after this Patrick's presentation. So yes, it's ongoing and will continue to be.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Coralie. Anything else? Okay, I guess we can move on, Patrick.
Excellent. So Electoral Area F. Now this one is still a bit of a work in progress, I would say. I think there's still some work to do on this one. It's quite the complicated area because of the agricultural lands, the agricultural land reserve, and the desire, obviously, to try and connect, in many ways, Missachi Lake and Honeymoon Bay. So I think there still is some work to be done here. You know, there's some lots here that have been identified. There's the golf course and some of these other lots just north of Honeymoon Bay that have been identified for potential exclusion from the ALR. You know, we may want to speak a little bit about that in more detail. There is also sort of this area just in the middle between Missachi Lake and Honeymoon Bay, which currently is designated for agriculture. Some of these lands are in the agricultural land reserve and would eventually, given our growth containment boundary map, would be located within that GCB. So again, something we're identifying as a special study area to really ensure that this is planned in a bit more detail, because you know just designating some of these larger lots as say village residential or medium lot suburban, for instance, it could lead to a significant amount of development, and we would just want to make sure that we're doing that in a well planned way. So some of the changes that we have incorporated is really formalizing the parks and open space area just alongside this creek, and then extending the village residential designation along the highway here, where there is an application, I believe, that's in the works already. So I'll just maybe leave it there for now. I think, yeah, there's still some conversations, I think, to be had around this particular area to really refine it.
Okay, and I see Ian has a question.
Well, actually, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm really thrilled with what we have at this point, but I'm noticing some areas that I think the designations are incorrect. They need to be, you know, it's really hard to see with the colors on some of these, so I would be more than happy to discuss offline and make sure that those are clarified. Like, some look like they're residential, but they should actually be tourist commercial. And the downtown core, I think, might need to be redesignated village core residential. But I think there's enough that there needs to be some offline conversation. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Any other questions on Area F? Don't hear any, don't see any. Okay, great, Patrick, thank you. We'll move on.
Excellent. So Electoral Area G. So as I mentioned, we've incorporated a new designation, and you've seen it in a few other electoral areas, but it was mostly spurred on here by in this particular location. So you see that country suburban designation now that makes its way through sort of most of the residential neighborhoods of Saltaire here. And then, so along with that, we have this little commercial pocket. I believe this one sort of note here of medium lot suburban is actually a mobile home park. So that's why it's a bit orange there. And yeah, there is a little pocket here of large lot suburban. That may just be a small error, but essentially the idea here is to make sure to protect or to have sort of that green belt surrounding the Saltaire community, given sort of the lack of servicing in this area.
Okay, and I see Lynn has a question.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the map, and yes, you're correct. That little pink nose down there is in need of a correction, and we have another correction that I've sent in, but that's great. This is really reflects the lack of service. It shows the slope, the clay, and really when you look at it, we have one road, and you can either go north or you can go south. So we don't have any other access to Saltaire. So this is great. I really appreciate the time that we sat down and went through this in much detail with everything that you have that's non-conforming, that you kind of wonder about, well, what about this, and what about that? So it was great. We were able to clarify some of the parkland that's a little bit complicated, and as leases or agreements, and it's not really your parkland, it's really somebody else's. So it's been great. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Okay, I think we can move on. Thank you, Patrick.
Excellent. So moving on to Electoral Area H. So really, the main, I guess, aspects to cover is we have, in the grand scheme of things, are some rural designations sort of out in the Yellow Point area and a couple tourist commercial properties up on the waterfront. We have an entire area here close to the Chuck Wagon sort of development that we've designated as a special study area. And that's specifically for servicing concerns in this area. But we've also, we've cut up this particular property. Here, I'll zoom in. I think this is the one that Director Martman was referring to, right adjacent to Diamond. So really, it's just this piece of land here that has development potential for it, while the rest is protected as looks like right now that it's designated for agriculture, which we should maybe change to parks and open space, I believe. So we'll make sure to fix that, I believe. And then the last thing that I just wanted to highlight, so Diamond is going to be primarily designated here as large lot suburban, so density of 5 units per hectare. But we've also, so we were planning on including another sort of employment node here with that mixed employment designation, but given the concerns around the aquifer, the Cassidy aquifer, and the sensitivity there, we've pulled that back, and we have removed those employment lands from the highway close to the airport there. So I'll leave that there and see if there are any questions.
I think Ben has a comment.
Thank you, Patrick. And yes, I think what you've shown, other than maybe the agricultural land around the Diamond area, is what you heard. And I just wanted to emphasize how the aquifer is important, and if there's development, that's not the place. And I think that's what Director Nicholson also, alludes to about where should these nodes occur. And I don't know how we encourage the RDN, because they'll be doing their own thing just north of Area H, to also, respect this part of an asset, a natural asset that we have. So anyways, thank you for your work.
Great, thank you, Ben. Okay, Patrick, I think one more to go, I believe.
Excellent. Yeah, so next we have Electoral Area I. So we'll start off here next to the village. So really, UBO is primarily designated for that large lot suburban, which would essentially be what exists there today. There's a little bit of tourist commercial, but this country suburban designation we've placed to just north of, I forget the name of the road, UBO Road, where the slopes become quite steep. So essentially just saying that those areas, really we don't want to see further subdivision. We don't want to provoke any kind of potential damage to those slopes. We've added a special study area around these western lands here to say that, you know, I think the old sort of master plan had designated certain pockets for clustered development and then eventually sort of village center with some commercial development in that brown, so darker brown area. And I think that application has now is now not really relevant. So what we wanted to ensure to put on here is that, you know, there's an opportunity here for a master plan, a comprehensive plan, to see how this all sort of fits together as one development. As we move closer to Lake Cowichan, that country suburban designation is also used along much of the waterfront here. There are a few pockets of forestry lands in here that I think are part of or within the growth containment boundary, but would that may sort of incite a sort of an OCP amendment for a comprehensive development. Yeah, I think this is sort of the big changes, I guess, in the UBO area. There are a few pockets of tourist commercial as well, and I'll sort of open it up, I guess, to comments here.
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Klaus.
On the UBO lands development, if you look at that area just up from the village commercial area, there's supposed to be a pocket in there of, I think it was either light industrial or a mix of light industrial and commercial institution or something like that, because I remember there were discussions. There's going to be a marina. That's one of the plans, and the discussion was in that area there would be storage for boats, and there would be a possible administration building. And I looked at my old records here, and I couldn't find any reference to that, but I know there were discussions about that because I talked to an institution that was going to construct a building in there for administration. And so if you could look that up, I don't know, but there's some it was either commercial or light industrial or some designation, because if you drive through there, I don't know if you've been out there, there's a fence and there's a gate, and behind that fence and the gate there was a large cleanup, and then they protected the whole area with huge like tarps, very heavy rubber material, and that's what the commercial area was supposed to be, or with light industrial or whatever. I forgot now what was planned, but anyway, that's the only change that I could see that should be in there.
Yeah, and I think to a certain extent the reason why we've applied the special study area overlay over these lands is to say, you know, there's likely going to be a master plan, a proposal that will present something that might be a little bit different than what this map shows, and that it allows a bit of flexibility specifically to permit some of those other types of uses when a comprehensive plan comes through.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, I don't see any more for Area I. I do have one last question, Allison. Question about Satlam. Allison.
Thanks. Yes, we seem to have jumped right over Satlam, and I had a burning question.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's just to the left of the inset, yeah. So my question is really around small lot versus large lot rural residential. So we seem to have most of the area is small lot. And I know that in the Satlam, actually probably throughout my area, there have been probably subdivision, lots have been subdivided down to sizes that people aren't so comfortable with. They like the larger lots of resident rural feel. So I'm wondering what the rationale for all the small lot everywhere is, except for along the river.
So along the river, I believe it used to be a river corridor designation that specifically matched up quite well with the large lot designation, whereas the rural residential designations that existed just off of the river aligned a little bit better with the small lot rural designation. So it is just a question of matching the existing designations to the new framework. However, if there are concerns about the subdivisions that have occurred in the past being too small for the particular character of these neighborhoods, we could absolutely take a look at down designating some of these lots in Satlam to prevent further subdivision from a designation perspective. It'd be interesting to see what the underlying zone is and if it's the zone that's entitling property owners to subdivide, because in that case, we can designate this large lot subdivision, but if the zone allows for smaller lots, then we can't prevent that through the OCP. But there are the properties that are a little bit brighter in yellow along the river corridor here are large lots rural. And so those ones are noted here to be kept as such. But yeah, I think you're speaking a little bit to these properties here.
Yeah. So can I? So will this be a point of conversation specifically on the community circles?
Yeah, I think the land use map is certainly a point of conversation for the community circles. I think we want people to look at this. We want people to tell us if these designations make sense to them. So
yeah, I think that there's some people, of course, like to be able to subdivide their property and all that kind of thing. But I know that there's a general sense in the community that we've developed too much. There's too much sprawl in Satlam, and we need to rein it back. But maybe it's too late. I don't know.
Okay.
We can take a look at that a little bit. Yeah.
Well, very good. Patrick, do you have closing comments or anything more?
That's, I think, it. I mean, I think, in terms of process moving forward, this was a really constructive session. I've taken down some notes, and I'll be glad to speak with some of you perhaps, very soon to discuss a few more details here and there. But ultimately, I think we're in a really great place, and I'd love to just make a few more refinements, a few more edits, and we'll be seeing each other on March 3rd and March 10th to discuss sort of the content of the MOCP in terms of policy, in terms of implementation and indicators. And I think at that point, we'll have some updated maps as well. So they won't be the topic of our presentation, but you'll be able to see some of the changes that we're implementing based on the conversation today at this point. And then I hope that once we've achieved, once we've gone past that March 10th meeting, we'll be able to move forward with the materials for the community circles. So thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes, I just really want to appreciate you for an amazingly detailed presentation and all your stamina. So everybody, a virtual clap, and also all the people behind the scenes, the staff that worked on the maps and putting together this whole thing. It must have been a lot of work. So thanks, everyone.
Absolutely. Big thanks to Andrea and her team at the GIS at the CVRD, and of course to Coralie, who's coordinating all of us, and Aaron's team, of course, at GeoLiquor, or Liquor Geospatial.
Great. Thanks very much to you all. So I guess, Coralicia, did you want to say anything before we go to, I was thinking a 5-minute break before we come back to the public engagement?
Yeah, no, just a thank you, hearty thank you to Patrick.
Okay, great. I'll see everybody in 5 minutes, please.
A point of clarification, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
We have no applicants for public input, so I'm not, the only thing that we have next is adjournment.
There is a staff report, yeah.
Yeah, I think do we not have the second staff report to do still?
It's short, but we do have a staff report from Allie Garnett.
Okay, if it's short, shall we just go right into it then? Do I see any nodding? Okay. All right. Okay, good. Go ahead, please, Ms. Garnett.
Thank you very much. I have a brief presentation to share if you'd like on the engagement and consultation plan.
Okay.
So this is just report R2 on the revised MOCP engagement and consultation plan. A previous engagement plan was presented in July, and this update just includes some refinements that we've come to over the last 6 months. One of the main features of the engagement consultation is the development of the planyourcouchin.ca site. And this is just a snapshot of the main page. So we're excited to launch this. And one of the main features of the Plan Your Couchin site is information on community circles, as they are going to be the primary means of communicating with and soliciting feedback from the community on the proposed MOCP. So with the community circles, there's opportunities to register in CVRD-led community circles, and then there's also opportunity to register to facilitate a community-led community circle. So there's an important distinction on those two. And then there's also a video on how to form your own community circle. So we're trying to support the community to participate in as many ways as they can. So this is just a quick month by month schedule of events, just a high level. There's much more detail provided in the attachment A. So at the end of March, the community circle facilitator training will begin. There are 4 opportunities for volunteers from the community who want to host a circle to participate in facilitation training. Then in April, we have the scheduled events for the CVRD-led circles that will focus on the 8 policy goals of the MOCP. That'll be followed in May by the CVRD-led circles, this time on the local area plans. And then really anytime the community can participate and plan in their own community-led circles.
Okay.
So this is just a little excerpt from the plan, and I've just sort of highlighted a few pieces to talk about. So in February, we'll be launching the social media campaign, and a detailed schedule will be provided to the directors so that you are able to share within your networks and really distribute this information broadly. We'll also be launching the Plan Your Couch and engagement platform. In March, we'll be launching the print ads and radio ads, and we're really focusing on a broad region-wide distribution of this information. In April, the intention is to establish a regional APC advisory committee that's subject to bylaw 4408 adoption. And then of course, in May, we'll be holding many more meetings, a continuation of all of the previously mentioned campaigns. And then in June is really the celebration of everyone's work, everyone's participation in the event that we've over the previous month. So all of the workbook submissions will be collated into an ideas book, and at the Ideas Fair on June 17th, we will be celebrating the community and releasing that ideas book. And concurrent with all of these activities will be communication and consultation with First Nations. As Patrick and Corley had mentioned, meetings have been taking place already, and we will continue to do that. So with that said, the recommendation is to approve the MOCP engagement and consultation plan, which is dated February 3rd, 2022.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. So I see it's been moved and seconded. And do you have any discussion? Director Markman and then Smith.
Thank you. I was just reviewing the dates that are on the community circles for the local area plans. And the Area H, I see falls on May 15th. I believe that's a long weekend.
Through the, sorry, yeah, to answer that, through the chair, if I may, we have checked the long weekend dates, and I'm quite certain we've avoided them.
Okay. Yeah, that's just my one concern. I thought it was the third Monday of May is the holiday, but I could be corrected.
May 23rd, Victoria Day.
Is the fourth Monday. Yeah. Huh, interesting. I guess this section, that's about the weekend, but they specifically picking a Sunday. I noticed the other places are on Saturdays. So not sure if we're special, but Sundays are often harder to get people to attend.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, if I can respond to that, it's always difficult to try to find a time where you can reach everyone. It's extremely difficult. We've tried to find 2 different opportunities, so there'll be 2 separate Sundays. We've avoided Sunday morning. So though and we have focused a lot of other circles in the evening. So we were just trying to find a balance, and it is imperfect, likely. The alternative, though, for people, if they cannot attend those, is to join the community-led community circles, because those can be scheduled at additional times.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Lynn.
You caught me with my calendar trying to figure out my dates. Thank you. One of the things I'd like to ask about the community circles that are not CVRD led, the people that will be the facilitator of those community circles need to be trained through the training process. And is that correct? Before they host a community circle? And then I have a follow-up.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes, we are strongly encouraging people to attend the facilitation training, and there are 4 different opportunities to do so. There will also be a facilitator guidebook, and then, as I said, the video as well to sort of support people in undertaking that. So yeah, at this point, we're strongly encouraging that people do that. But we will not take the stance of stopping people from holding the circle if they don't.
Thank you. I think that it's really important to have the training, and then we will have facilitators that are looking to host meetings that are for the whole community. And sometimes you can get into the weeds when you get a group that's just got one special interest, and it's not looking at the whole community and being productive. Thank you.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, add on to that, there will also be the workbooks also in question and answers associated with each policy goal and each local area plan will provide additional sort of direction for what we're hoping is like a meaningful engagement and really trying to get information that we can then incorporate back into the MOCP. So that'll be providing additional guidance.
Okay, great. Allison, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. My question is about the local area plan community circles. And I have an area that is partially the people think they're in, that are in B are actually in, we have a lot of people in Cowichan Station who are in area B, but actually feel that they're in area E, and it's Cowichan Station and the Coxila part of it. So are they going to have to attend 2 things, or will you be covering more than just, like, what's the boundary of the local area plan that you're doing?
Right. Thank you. Through the chair. The boundaries of the local area plans are really, I think, to be determined. We are meeting at this point based on electoral areas, and we've joined, as you probably note in the schedule, three electoral areas together for discussions. I realize that with the boundaries that you're concerned with, there might not be a crossover, right? So certainly people can attend any of the local area plan meetings, and that's an important issue I think that you've raised, and maybe something that we'll take into account through the development of the workbook for those particular local area plans.
Yeah, I think that's going to be important.
Okay, thank you. Before I go back to Ben, did I miss anybody? Lori? No? No? Okay, Ben, go ahead.
Sorry, maybe I misunderstood, but did I hear you say that for the local area plans, then people from those three areas will meet at one time in one location? Or are you doing Area G, Area H, Area I separately at that time?
If I may answer that, Mr. Chair. Yes, we are bringing together people from who are interested in three electoral areas at a time. Now we can use breakout rooms to get into sort of more specific conversations in those meetings. But just the general introduction of the meeting and how the meeting will be operated, all of that. There's some efficiencies in gathering the electoral areas together. But as I said, breakout rooms can be used.
You are aware that there's an hour difference, or not, well, 50 minutes difference between area H and I?
All of the meetings will be held virtually.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. All right. So that brings another question. Why?
Why will they be held virtually?
Yes. I'm curious because in the end of May, without everything that's indicated right now, in-person meetings will be probably back in place. So if that's the case, will that be facilitated?
At this point, because we've had to schedule these in advance and because of the current public health orders, we've planned for them all to be virtually. The community-led circles can adapt as they want and perhaps are more flexible if they are scheduled upon more short notice. But at this stage, all of the CVRD events will be virtual.
Thank you.
I saw Ms. Breen pop up. I'd just like to voice for Area H, that's just not something that this community will find very acceptable. They are looking for the CVRD to take a leadership role, but they are looking to be in person. They understand that if the public health orders require it in that date, but if they're not public health orders in that date, I think speaking on behalf of my community, this will not work for them.
Okay, Coralie?
Through the chair, we recognize that we're there because of the uncertainty in terms of the public health orders, but in addition, the costs from a CVRD perspective. So the plan was to host these ones on the local area plans and hope and encourage that each community would then host their own community circles with their own facilitators. So this is particularly on the local area plans where we're at the stage where we are literally at the beginning of looking at identifying what they should be going into the MOCP, collecting that initial information. It would be different if we were further along and having the more kind of in-depth type of conversation that we just had on the overall macro level with the GCBs and land use designations. The purpose of these community circles is to get a general sense of what the community thinks neighborhoods and local area plans should be, to inform a report that's going to come through to the electoral area directors in September with recommendations of how we proceed over the next 2 or 3 years, budget-wise and timeline-wise. So for all those efficiencies, costs, et cetera, that is why we've planned or are advancing that plan in that way. But we are going to be encouraging each electoral area to have volunteers to have those sessions individually as well.
Okay.
Does that help?
No.
Follow-up, Ken?
Thank you for the explanation. I do appreciate it. Thank you. I appreciate a follow-up. I can't vote for this. It is something that goes against what I've heard from my community, and it isn't about. It's about that they can't participate. You know, they are at the end of COVID, and they're going like, getting into Zoom, getting through webinars, doing all those pieces is very difficult. And it's just a small group in my community that's able to navigate those things. So they are feeling excluded in this process, and I can't vote for a process that's going to exclude my community.
Yeah, through the director, we will, any electoral area that wants help with us convening their own community circles, we will do that. They just have to reach out to us, appoint a facilitator, contact Ali or myself, and we will help that process happen.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah. And let's hope you're right, Ben. We are at the end of COVID, because there's no telling that we really are. So go ahead, Lynn.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if there's technology out there where we can use a wall in a building like Ben at the community center, that you project it onto the wall, and then there's a microphone that somebody could go up to and speak at if they have a question, but everybody can watch it on a screen. Is that something that could be explored for a double purpose type thing? Like a hybrid? It's not, it's something you'd have to think about, and you might have to talk to IT how we could do that. I mean, I have a projector, and if there's a way of hooking it up.
We're certainly open to explore. We've been having lots of discussions of what possibilities could be on Zoom, on all sorts of other things. So we certainly have had those conversations, and we're open to continue to do that, to try to have this engagement also in a meaningful way.
Okay. Good. Well, I think we can follow up on that one, Lynn, later. And so, seeing no further, I'd really like to call the question on this one. All in favor? Opposed? One opposed. Motion carries. Great. Thank you. Kathleen, what's next?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item would be question period, and I still have no applicants for that item.
Okay.
So the last item would be adjournment.
Okay, motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Motion carries.